Hey everyone, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. You guys will be interested to know that at 4 p.m. local time, Dave has been up for an hour.
It's pretty great. Early today.
Yeah, he got up early. He's ready to serve us. He's ready to help us out. We were just asking before we started recording if Dave was happier about things starting to maybe open up a little bit with the coronavirus stuff to get his family out of the house, or more interested in, like, more paranoid about the disease. And unfortunately, the answer was, Dave?
More paranoid about the disease. You said that was a boring answer.
It's way funnier the other way.
I'm just defeated right now.
Like, he's like, well, the world's fucked, but man, I could really use some time to myself.
Do you have any victories to speak of?
I finished like one of the best short stories I've written in a long time.
That is a huge victory. That's really good.
That's it. And we're starting at other things, so that's cool.
You also finished not just a book, but an entire series, which is always hard to do. That's what Johnny's trying to do right now. But his overage, the amount that he is going over is longer than your last book.
Fuck you.
Yeah, closing series.
Nothing is ever good enough for you.
Closing series is always really. It's not that it is hard, but it's more that I always underestimate it, because you're not just closing a book, you're closing all the boxes in reverse order, basically, that you ever opened. So I keep thinking, like, well, there's that character, there's that thing that I said 3 books ago that kind of never went anywhere, and there's this ongoing tension between these characters that I've been ignoring. And so, like, I've been telling Sean all week, I'll be done by the end of this week, and today's Friday. And this morning, I spent all my time figuring out what still had to be resolved, realizing all the time I was never going to get it done today while I was resolving it. And then I said, well, hopefully by the end of next week. Like, it just, it's like ending after ending after ending, because you have to close all the boxes.
How long is the book?
My guess is it'll probably end up being about 120,000, but it was supposed to be around 80, maybe 85.
Yeah,
so split it into 2 books.
Yeah, Dave. Well, yeah, it wouldn't work that way though. But I wasn't even bagging on you at all. It was more of just the complete difference in process. Like, Johnny and I talk about this a lot. It's very difficult for us to not write long. In fact, the chapter I had today was very neatly plotted out as a sub 2,000 word chapter, and I think it's 3,500 words. That just happens over and over.
I mean, you're just never, ever going to worry about that. I just have to accept that. Like, I'm going to write long, period.
You also talk long, both of you.
Well,
I'm a man of few words.
Yes.
Well, I want
exactly.
Understood, right? Like, I got to make sure you guys got this all.
Yeah, I mean, there's the way to say it, and then there's the way to say it that wastes yours and the reader's time. And
mine always ends up being like, I need emotional background or context or something like that. So, like, I know there are writers who can be like, the room was dark and scary and he jumped into the room. I mean, better than that, but like one sentence, and I'll be like, I got to describe everything. Like, I got to really set the mood. Like, I can hear the score in my background playing out low.
Yeah, and my natural tendency is much closer to Johnny, but then I'll get, I clip it. So where yours, Dave, your native copy is just really lean. Like, you don't get super introspective.
Dave fucks the details.
A little bit.
I get right to the fucking.
Except for when somebody's pooping, then lots of details.
Hissing, get it right.
All right.
No, there's some pooping too.
Where?
I always tell you this. In Yesterday's Gone, you have a shit in a bucket scene, and it's all.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's. And at the time I was like fine with it. Only now in retrospect do I realize how unnecessary it was.
Well, this is the absurdity scale from low to high. There's writing that scene, but then above that is forgetting that you wrote that scene. Like, it was just so, like, by the way, it doesn't even matter.
So, Johnny,
people poop and piss. I mean, what's the fucking
big
deal?
Scene, would you remember it?
If I what?
If you wrote a shitting in a bucket.
Well, when you said that, I was actually trying to remember if I have written a shit in a bucket scene, because I can totally see doing that in one of the comedies. And actually, I don't remember. So if I have, then there you go.
The thing is, this wasn't a comedy. It was a straight up, like, it was just the guy.
Did he at least poop suspensefully?
No, see, Dave cannot write anyone's morning routine without including the bathroom because he thinks it's unrealistic.
I'm picturing a scene where there's like a broken metronome clicking in the background and children
Is there
outside.
Somebody in the audience that doesn't piss when they wake up?
No, but how many shows do you watch where they show somebody
Well,
like...
they're not realistic. I like realism, man.
Okay, you also...
Well, this is the Hitchcock dictum that says drama is life with the boring bits cut out. It just means that Dave doesn't think that bathroom functions are boring.
No, he doesn't. But it shows you where...
They're art.
It really does show you how much he personally, as a human, thinks about going to the bathroom.
It's like a drug habit. When can I get back in
OCD,
there?
all right?
All right. Anything cool? Oh, sorry. Topic first. So today we're going to talk about pacing yourself to avoid burnout, which actually I think is really
Too late.
Right. Because I've had some burnout. I think there's reasons for that.
420, man. We're all burnouts.
We are burnouts. By the way, I watched Up in Smoke the other day. That was fun. I hadn't seen it in a long time. Cheech and Chong.
I've actually never seen Up in Smoke.
It's not great, but it's funny.
I think I watched 10 minutes of it and thought, I'm never going to watch the other 110.
No, and it gets really stupid at the end. They just go to like the battle of the bands. But I just love this scene where like Cheech is driving and he goes, how am I driving? And Tommy Chong goes, I think we're stopped. They're just by the side of the road.
Do you like weed humor more than you used to?
Yeah, I think I do.
Have you seen Midnight Gospel yet? I mean, that's only semi-related.
I watched the first few episodes.
Did you like it?
I don't know what I think of it yet. I like the colors. I hate the animation. I think it's fucking awful.
Did you like Adventure Time?
I never saw that.
I like the colors.
I like the colors of it. The colors are really well. I don't like the way they draw things. The topical stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. I have individual thoughts on each episode so far.
I've only seen the first two.
Story overall good?
It's not a story.
Stories overall?
It's not story.
It's basically them talking to somebody about like real shit, but then fictionalizing like everything around it. So it's like they're taking like topical podcast and then
you're listening to a podcast episode. It's like Joe Rogan meets Adventure Time, kinda, but not really.
So you like the colors, but you're really kind of dragging on the whole so it's like a Zack Snyder review.
Well, no, Zack Snyder looks pretty, but lacks any content. This is the opposite of that. And the drawing style is very 70s, but it's like jagged lines. It just doesn't look pretty or clean or anything. It's not supposed to. It's just the aesthetic I don't like. So, but I mean, I like the colors.
It's busy, but I actually do like it. I'm real curious to see. It's an anthology too. It's not like there's one storyline that you're following. At least I don't get that impression.
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah. So,
is this anybody's something cool? Or I'm sorry.
No,
Dave, continuing on.
I got nothing more to say. My something cool is Showtime wrapped up Homeland, so I'm watching that on my Showtime preview while I have that. So, yeah.
Oh my god, dude, that's my something cool. Kind of
started it.
Yes. Okay. So my something cool is I just watched the first episode, and what I love is how they set it up, because this goes in line with what you guys were both talking about. You've just each finished a series, or Johnny's finishing and you just finished. Yeah. And so this is the 8th and final season of Homeland. And within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, are they going to do what I think they're going to do? And of course they do. So the setup for the final season, in the first season, there's somebody who's a traitor. They've been brainwashed and tortured overseas, and they come back as like, a terrorist. And they're like a decorated war hero, but they're actually working for the enemy. And they set up the final season to where Carrie Matheson, the person who took him down, the same thing happens to her.
Well, that's debatable. It's not yet.
But it doesn't matter.
Is this spoiler territory, what you guys are doing right here?
Yes. Well, no, it's done in the pilot, or the first episode. It's set up. I don't know where they take it, but the fact that that's the central question of the final episode
brings it full circle.
Poetic. Yeah. Like, I really, really love that they're setting that
I didn't realize that the Russian dude from this series. I forget his damn name now, but it's Oleg from The Americans, whom I absolutely love. That actor.
Yeah, I like him.
He's in this as well, and goddamn, he's so good. So
yeah, we're watching The Americans now. I think we're like
that show
4 or something like that.
So I'll do an anti something cool, which is Working Moms. All right, so
Take that, Catherine Reitman.
I like Catherine Reitman, and I really like the first season.
I thought you meant Working Moms in general. I was like, wow, I didn't know we were going that way.
No, the show Working Moms.
They should be home, pregnant, and cooking food.
Season 4 just dropped on Netflix, and I felt like they kind of deteriorated. I've enjoyed each season less.
That's exactly how I felt. When I saw that there was a season 4, I said, man, I was really not that into season 3. I hope it's better.
Yeah. Have you started it?
No, but I didn't like it in a really specific way. I'm sure we will, because Robin will want to. It's not like it got worse. It's like they pulled the rug out from under me, and it's a different show. It's like political in a weird way in season 3 or something.
It gets stupid. Like, it's just, we watched 2 more episodes yesterday, and then we're just like, I'm out. But I do have something you and Robin would probably really enjoy. It's one of those movies that you look it up and it's 2 stars. And you're like, okay, so most people did not get the joke, but I think you'll totally get the joke. So it's a send-up of rom-coms. Like, it takes it down. And the 2 leads are Amy Poehler and Paul Rudd. And,
good leads.
Right. And Bill Hader's in it, and I'm blanking on her name, but Erin from The Office, a bunch of people, like a bunch of comics that you know. And
why can't I remember her name either? Damn it!
I know, right?
I know it.
But it's a bunch of people that you know, and they're all funny, and they were all clearly in on the joke. But most people who watched it apparently were not. All right, we watched it for family night last week and laughed a lot. So even the title tells you what kind of rom-com you're in for. It's called They Came Together, right? And so Paul Rudd and Amy Poehler are at dinner with Bill Hader and Erin from The Office.
Ellie Kemper is her name.
Ellie Kemper, thank you. And they're like, oh, we could tell you the story of how we got together. It's just like one of those really bad rom-coms. And they're like, tell us your story. And so they tell the story, but then it's like just ridiculous how much they lean into the tropes. And there'll be moments where she'll say something like, you're only saying that because you have to say that at this part of the story to win me back, even if it's totally unrealistic. Right? So I could totally see how if you're not into the joke, it's just not funny. But if you are, and you like Amy Poehler and Paul Rudd being in on that joke, it is a good time.
Awesome. Well, I had a something cool, but I forgot it. So we'll just move along, shall we?
Fantastic.
All right. So let's talk about avoiding burnout. And I mean, we do write a lot, and this is where it's kind of a catch-22, so not a catch-22, but it's like, which side do you listen to? Because we're, at the beginning, it was always like, write, publish, repeat. Like, that's one of the things we said. We said that speed doesn't, deteriorate quality, that writing fast is good. We've banged that drum a lot.
Write, publish, repeat, drop dead.
Write, publish, repeat, have a stress, have a panic attack. But burnout comes, is a logical side effect. And plus, I think that we've also turned around a little bit on, hey, it's like the guy who invented infinite scroll. There's a little bit of like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry we talked about this so much, because now everybody's neurotic and the market's being flooded in some ways. So, yeah, burnout. You were starting to say something, Sean.
I was?
You always are.
That does sound like me. I don't know what I would have been saying.
Okay, well, I'm done with what I was going to say. So
I think my first case of burnout was after we signed a book deal with 47 North. We had already had like 3 series going. And
wait, what do you mean your first case? Aren't you still suffering?
Well, going back, he said first. I'm going back.
Should I say my only case?
Yes, my case.
My several years long case.
My untreated case of burnout.
We've heard the story a few times about you guys doing Yesterday's Gone and For Nevermore, and then
White Space
and then you've got the 47 North thing, and then it's like Sean, you're in my story about the comedies where it's like, well, we're going to do one or the other. Well, let's do them both. And so it's funny to look back because that seems like it would really clearly jar against the way that you work best, Dave, right? I mean, you I know you pulled it off, but I also know that it kind of broke you a little bit.
Yeah. So one series would have been one thing, but doing two, and just we're doing that. We're also writing our own stuff, and we had different deadlines we were dealing with. We're dealing with other people's deadlines or editors and stuff, and just the constant. And I don't even remember it all. It's kind of a haze, but just
but I think that one of the big walls that actually hit you wasn't the amount of work, because you are a worker, and even if you don't work smart, you do work hard.
Well, it's all the things juggling in my head.
Well, I don't think that was it, because you were able to do that for 2 seasons of Yesterday's Gone, 2 seasons of White Space, and for Nevermore. But we were seeing constant success there. We would get the reviews, we would get the sales, so you didn't want to drop that ball, because you saw the money coming in and you saw the the validation coming in. But then we did the stuff for 47 North and it flopped. We got shit reviews on the first series, and the second series they just ignored it. Like, that's when that particular program that we were involved in was just, they killed it, and so we were just buried, and that fucks with you psychologically a little bit, where you're just like, so I did all of this, but it wasn't worth anything, and it was hard to recover from that. I think that if we had seen the same momentum with our 47 North projects that we did with our own stuff, I don't think it would have hurt you as much.
And I know my books aren't as good as, say, a Fast and Furious movie, but
zing!
No, it's
Take
a very
that.
specific diss, actually.
Man, Fast and Furious, and who was it taking some serious flack today?
Working on
Catherine Reitman. Yeah.
You know what I think it is? Like our initial idea for Z2134 was a mashup of Hunger Games and Walking Dead. And I'm very averse to mashups of existing things or ever ripping something off. I like to think that I'm original, even if they say there's no original ideas. And that was something where we really leaned into it, and the people at 47 North were like, yes, that's awesome. And I don't feel that we were, because I had only read like the opening chapters of the Hunger Games, so I didn't even fucking see them. I didn't even know if the movie was out.
They're actually nothing alike.
Right. So, but I wanted to avoid that comparison at the same, have the comparison, but also not, feel like I was ripping something off. And when the early reviews came in saying we had ripped it off, that just fucking kicked me in my gut, because like I like to think that I'm super fucking original, and the things I think of are like cool shit. And I don't ever want to be like the hack writer that's just fucking, oh, that works, so I'm going to fucking take that. And to kind of be accused of that.
Yeah, like the kind of guy who just puts a stand in every book.
Fuck you. But I mean, if you look at the stuff we've done, yeah, there's elements of everything that I love. I definitely embrace my inspirations, but I feel like we find new ways to do it. I've never, like, I consciously avoid trying to copy the people I like. Like, I've never written anything even close to Clive Barker, more probably because I can. But the fact that so many reviewers just kicked us in the guts over that just really wounded my psyche. Like, I was like, I'm going to fuck that. So I don't know. So yeah, there's some truth to that. There was that element of it. And then Monstrous, which was just ignored. So yeah, those two things back to back did fuck with my head.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Same thing happened to Johnny too. His burnout was more about headspace than about ability to do the work,
It was absolutely about headspace.
I think headspace is the most damaging or dangerous thing for a writer. If you're in the wrong headspace, you can't produce, or at least you can't produce at optimum levels.
But ironically, the ability to tap into differing headspaces and different emotional conditions is what's going to fuel you. So even if you could be on kilter all the time as a writer, I don't think it's a good idea.
No, and the more you suffer, actually, the more you put yourself into uncomfortable situations and survive them, the more tools you have to tell a better story. It's sometimes you have to go through shit and you have to let it make you stronger.
Why do you always get me off my cross then when I'm trying to suffer?
Well, you can only spend so much time on the cross.
I'd like everybody to stop and picture Dave on the cross. One of those little loincloths.
Does anybody want to write Dave on the cross with me?
Fat Jesus. Go ahead, Johnny.
Oh my God, Fat Jesus would be kind of awesome.
I think someone's already done that.
Really?
There's like
somebody had already done Fat Vampire.
And Zach Galifianakis, I think, used to call himself Fat Jesus.
No, I totally see that.
I totally see that. There is a Fat Jesus thing going on there. So how do you know when, Johnny, it's probably not happened to you enough to where you can see a pattern, or has it? Because, it feels kind of like you had one kind of long winter of it, where Dave it's more seasonal. Not that it comes every winter, but he'll be, good, and then he'll kind of hibernate a little, and then good and hibernate a little. So you guys have different styles of burnout. Dave, do you know your patterns? And Johnny, do you think you had enough of it to where you can recognize the pattern?
Okay, you asked the question, so you tell which one of us to go first.
Dave.
There you go.
I don't know my patterns enough to stop. Like when I feel I do, I feel like I'm actively working against them, but then sometimes they'll catch me by surprise. A lot of it though has to do with other shit going on in my life. Like when other shit is overwhelming, then it becomes way harder to write and get in the headspace.
Well, yeah, with this last, with the Corona hole thing, I didn't even bother. Right. I was never like,
Isn't that game people play with beanbags that actually sounds like butt sex, but everybody's just ignoring that?
Like cornhole in the yard with the kids.
Yeah,
okay,
I didn't.
Grandpa.
There wasn't any reason to get on you, because I'm like, look.
Speaking of cornhole,
you're late. You're gonna be late, and the world is falling apart. I can't imagine going to Dave. Hey, can you hurry it up with the outline or with the draft? Like that's not going to happen. I think there's definitely times when it's just as simple as, okay, you can't ignore the reality of how your brain works and how you respond to things. And you've already got the OCD thing going on. If there's like, the world has all of a sudden become a petri dish and everyone is actively your enemy even more.
You remember OCD apocalypse? I think we're getting there.
I do. I totally do.
Yeah.
Oh,
Johnny's turn.
Okay, I felt like there was more there. You asked about patterns and stuff. Yeah, I think that I think the bottom line is that I think that I learn the lessons each time, I think is the way that I would put that. So it's not that anything wouldn't happen again or whatever. It's just that I would go into it better informed. So for instance, I think I really need to understand and fully embrace who I am. I think that in the past, I have tried to work in a different way or be somebody else, either for myself because I felt that there was something to it or the situation, or Sean, we were in kind of an ill-fitting partnership for a while there, and I think that some of that got to me because I didn't have the acuity. I didn't have the acuity to kind of see it, and now, like now that I'm sort of getting back to a sweet spot, I'm realizing like, okay, I kind of need to work a little differently than other people. Like I'm not as collaborative as I thought I might have been at once upon a time. I do tend to, I do write long is something that I talked about. I am very mood influenced, meaning that there are some days when I just know that I'm never going to get anything done and I might as well just give up. I know that some days I need to take a lot of time to organize, like today, and write very little. And I know that if something is going on externally in the world that I can't control and that is just going to happen. So for instance, if the Corona thing really besieged me, which it didn't once I got used to it, I would need to figure
out those first couple of days though, right? Like they really affected you.
Well, but too many variables, right? Because at this time I was also working on the project from hell. If I'd been working on,
right. Yeah.
Right. Because I kept making cynical, self-serving jokes like, well, at least I have something I really love to keep me, 'cause it was I actually think I do love that project now that I'm away from it. But I like that wasn't a clean test. Like I'd be curious to see, can we do the whole Corona thing again now that I'm working on stuff that I want to do?
That's fair because you really were at your wit's end already. I think that was after like maybe a week after you had the call. It was like, please, can I just not ever finish this?
Yeah, and I don't know if that was during revision or during finishing the final draft. It was probably the revision was when I
think it was the revision.
Because it was just like enough already. Like I finally finished it and I still have to deal with it. That was a pain in the ass. There's as much ahead of me as behind me. So I don't know, but I do know that like if somebody that I knew was really, really sick or something like that, I think it would be really hard for me to like put that out of my head. But then I guess I'm going to be morbid about it. If it were something that were chronic or inevitable and it's just going to take time, I don't know what I would do. I would have to be like, this is an emotionally crippling situation that if I don't learn to deal, I'm not going to write for years or something like that. So far it's been either things that are short-term and will pass, and I need to learn to lean into those things and adjust them, or I need to lean in fully to who I am and how I work, when in the past, I think I've tried to say, okay, well, I'm going to write super commercial. Can't do that. I'm going to write short and quippy. Can't do that. I'm going to hit 100% of my deadlines because I've anticipated the word count correctly. Not going to do that. It's too many words. So I think that the more I accept that, so Sean and I had an exchange today where I was like, are you telling me that we don't have like firm deadlines right here, right now? And it was like relief. And I'll probably hit any implied deadlines way better once I accept that rather than feeling external pressure, if that makes sense.
Right. Where Dave can't do that, right? Dave needs deadlines. And even those are suggestions more than anything. But even that kind of helps to keep him on the rails. If Dave didn't have actual deadlines and it was just, hey, turn this in when you feel like it's good enough,
right,
that wouldn't happen.
I might write the book 8 times.
Johnny's good enough is when he gets to the end, right? Then he's like, okay, I'm going to ship that, and now it's somebody else's problem.
But I have to do it all in one pass. I mean,
right.
The equivalent is I'm a painter who starts at one edge of the canvas and does a more or less complete painting as I go along. I think a lot of people work in layers, do one and then improve the entire thing the next time and then improve it again.
Yeah, I couldn't do it another way. I need layers because that layer gives me confidence. And it's funny how often now I really am just a victim to my own patterns. Or actually, no, I'm aware of my own patterns, but I'm not a victim to them. So I know that when I have that thought, and I had it today in the thing I'm writing, which I objectively, like, I know it's good. Like, I can distance myself away and say, I know that what I'm writing is good. But while I was in it today, I did not feel that way. And I was pretty sure it was terrible. And I just know that that's just part of the process and that I'll see it later. And it's always better the second time through. In fact, the hardest thing that I had to write this year, it was a CI version of our Steal This outline. And I didn't really like it. I didn't super connect with it, which was my fault. I should have taken more time with the outline to kind of own it ahead of time. And my biggest problem with it was I didn't think that I had enough character, and it was a novella, so there wasn't a lot of room for character. But I passed it to Dave, and this is something we should be better at with each other anyway, is Dave having confidence that I just got to get this done and give it to Sean, and same thing for me. And I passed it to him with, like, okay, I hope I'm not asking him to do a whole bunch of shit and a bunch of surgery, but I actually got all caps from Dave. I love this story. And his specific comment was how sharp the character work is in such a short piece of work. So, like, my biggest fear about that was that it wasn't very good and that the character work was not good at all. And he liked it, and he especially liked the character work. So mission accomplished. It shows. And just to be clear, Dave is not somebody who says love or uses all caps when he doesn't mean it. Right. So
I've yet to tell anybody in my family that I love them.
Especially in all caps.
Never.
Especially during this quarantine.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's I don't know. It's just, I don't think that we can ever truly judge our own work. Well, Johnny can, but I don't think most of us mortals, like, we just don't love ourselves that much, and we need someone.
Wow, thanks for the implication, but it's accurate, I suppose.
We just need someone else to kind of like.
Which god is Johnny? Is he Zeus?
Johnny's like when
Hercules?
Charlie Sheen was off the rails. He's like, I drink tiger blood. I am an Adonis. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but in all honesty, without the excess sarcasm, I think that that's one of the things that I do need to lean into. Like, I'm not good at being humble. I'm sorry. If you think I suck, that's fine. But
yeah, but you shouldn't be. Like, that is your style. And I think what you're finding, all of us, is that the more that we find our most natural style, and then we can build our projects around that, that's when we succeed. And we're trying to do that for every author in the studio. Like, who are you as a storyteller? What project can we build around your aesthetic, so that not only can you succeed, but you can succeed on repeat? And I think that burnout is actually something that you factor into and you're aware of. So, like, it absolutely is. For me, it's seasonal. It's just not consistent. I don't necessarily know when the season is going to come. Sometimes it's when I'm working on stuff that I just don't really want to do. Sometimes, we've had money issues in the studio in the past, and that affects my ability to create. Like, I just get, fuck, I got to go do that, to get in my head when I just want to tell a story. So my escape hatch has been being aware of it and being able to, like you said, Johnny, man, sometimes I just know I'm not going to be effective today, and I need to do something else, and acknowledge that rather than pretending to work and sitting in front of the computer for like 6 hours, not really doing anything other than reading Screen Rant or checking Slack.
But I think it's important that you're deliberate about that. So here's what I mean. This may be sort of me-centric, I'm not sure. But if I default, so there's three basic ways that a burnout sort of situation can go. One is I gut through it and I try to keep writing. If I get some writing out, it is inevitably bad. I know it when I'm writing it. I know when I come back to it, I usually just kind of throw it away. Or I can just like really, really, bang against it and feel miserable and produce very little. That's one way. The other way is to sort of non-deliberately screw off. So I procrastinate, I check Screen Rant, watch a bunch of Screen Rant or something like that, or I do something else. And I just kind of tell myself, well, I'm just taking a break. That's the worst option. And then there's the third option is to consciously step away. So the difference is in the decision for me. If I decide, okay, this is not going to be a writing day, I am consciously walking away. I'm going to do this other thing, even if this other thing is watching TV. Not that I want to do that very often, but I'm making a decision rather than sliding into it, because the sliding into it, the sort of accidental.
Yeah, letting shit happen to you instead of
Yeah.
making the choice. You're kind of ineffective by definition, because you're not being active in what's happening to you. You're just letting things happen to you. And then it's really easy to feel like a victim later. I had a shitty day. I didn't do anything. I didn't write anything.
And I always feel bad at the end of those days. I always feel like a piece of shit. I'm just mildly bummed out or malaise. And it's inevitable. I know that I need to make a decision either way.
Yeah, I'm the same way. If I have control over my day psychologically, and I know that I made the choice to do whatever it was, even if I have less on my list accomplished than I expected to, if I made choices along the way, great. If I allowed either other people's emergencies or my own lack of planning or my own lack of discipline, like, that's when I start beating myself up. When I'm just like, at the end of the day, what did I do?
Because you were subject to, you feel weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times too, when I have a lot to do, like, I almost need a lot to do and deadlines and people that I owe, because then I'm driven to like finish that all off. One of the worst things for me, and this is one of the reasons I keep my plate full as often as I do, because when I don't have a lot, I'm much more inclined to fuck around. I'm like, oh, I'll hit that whenever. Or
what's interesting about what you just said is that two things. Number one, I am almost exactly the opposite of that. And number two, that was not apparent. And if you don't realize it, if I look at, it's real easy to see Sean being a blitz, a blur of activity and all this stuff, and to think, well, that's clearly what I should be doing. And it's not. I'm way more productive and way better when I don't do that.
Yeah, and you have
And if
to.
you didn't understand that, you'd feel that I was screwing off.
Right. I think that every artist works differently. And, if you have the artist's temperament, you're probably not somebody who can hit the exact same schedule every single day, no matter what, because that's not really right brain behavior. We do want more challenge than that. We want more variety than that. And so kind of being aware of my temperature helps me to avoid burnout. And I've really never had severe burnout. I had, when working with Lori, was as close as I came. But that's because I didn't have control over what I was doing. I was just, hey, here's a pile of shit, do that. Okay, here's a pile of shit, do that. And at least now, when we have piles of shit, there's finished stuff at the end of it. So, there's that book. And even if the book isn't coming out for 2 more years, at least that book is done and ready to go out. There was a lot of stuff while working with Lori that was more, Dave was there. What was it like, Dave? It didn't matter. It was like somebody would, okay, we have 2 weeks to build this website, go. And then the website's built, and then, I don't have the domain name to go with that website. Build this one instead. That's not actually what happened, but that's kind of the same result. And so,
there are always urgent things.
Yeah, everything was in caps, everything was urgent, and none of it was something that was like legacy work or that I was really proud
urgent, but not important.
Yeah, and that got to be a bit much for me, which is why I left that to start writing Yesterday's Gone with Dave. But no matter how much we've had on our plate, there are things that burn me out or bum me out, but I've never really had burnout because I feel like, there's always this really big goal and it's always exciting and I'm able to pull back when I know I need to. So I had a 2-year period where I didn't write new words at all. I was just kind of producing or working on outlines or edits or polishes for the 3 of us. And I'd never made new copy. And then now I'm on 1,500 days in a row of writing. No, that can't be right. Maybe closing in on 1,000 maybe. But I've had a long streak of more than a couple of years of just writing every single day. And that keeps my muscles going. So I like that.
Yeah. And that would actually, that's another case of know yourself. That would actually hurt me because I'm sort of reward driven and not that, I love writing, but I like a break like that. It gives my head a break. And so knowing that I work hard for 5 days and then I have 2 days where I don't work, that gives me time to want to write again. Right. Mm-hmm. So by the end of Friday, I'm like, okay, well, that was a lot of words. And I still have, for instance, in this one, I still have all these words left. But by Monday, I'll be like, oh my God, can I get to it? Well, Tuesday, actually, because we have that other thing. I would also say that there are basically 2 ways, I think.
So wait, on that. So for you, it's desire-based, and for me, it's muscle-based.
It's some form of desire-based. It's definitely emotional. It's either carrot or stick or both. It's probably more carrot than stick. Like I definitely work better but that's true of everything. Like, this about me. I'm binary. I'm either on completely or I'm off completely. I do intermittent fasting, so I don't eat for most of the day, and then I eat a lot in a short period of time. I am an on or off person, and so Dave, it's natural.
How hard is it for you to write if you?
Are you talking to me? Because I thought you said something about. I thought you said Dave. Are you talking to me?
No, Dave. Okay. So if you don't want to write, how hard is it for you to write? Can you write and can you write and like the things that you wrote? Or if you don't want to write and you write, is it pretty much guaranteed you're also going to not like what you wrote?
I kind of push myself in hope that I will get into it. And usually I do at some point, but sometimes that's like my weakest stuff. So there does have to be a desire there. I think the toughest thing for like the story you did, the one that I edited that I liked, I didn't, when you guys were pitching the whole thing, I didn't like it at all. I didn't like the idea of it. I didn't like the idea of everybody doing a different version of it. It just wasn't me. So writing an outline for that was just like, I'm not feeling it. And it was difficult. So I'm surprised that I like the story. Like if I'm not buying it, it's harder for me to enjoy writing it.
I remember the only thing, because I've always leaned to Dave's preferences. 98% of the time that I worked with Dave, like whatever he wants to write, I'm fine with. I'm never insistent. I insisted one time. You listening there at home want to guess what happened? This one time I insisted on a story.
Dead baby on Christmas?
Yes, dead baby on Christmas. That's
like a cat
happened.
peeing on your carpet because it's the only way to express displeasure.
And it's not being passive aggressive. It's not like, well, fine, I'm going to write it, but I'm going to fuck it up.
No, it came from a really honest place. You hated me, and it was there on the page.
No, it's like I need to get the story on some fundamental level. If it feels artificial, if it feels like if it's just something I really fucking don't want, like if you guys tried to get me to write Decoy Wallet or something, I would just be so opposed to it. And I could not find in my heart to get into it. I think it's the same thing with that whole Hunger Games thing. Like if there's a level of artificiality there or just something that I don't get, it's hard for me to get into it because I got to feel what I'm writing. I got to be in that fucking space. I got to play pretend in my head and like dive in. And if I'm not there, it shows and it's hard.
No, it absolutely does. I agree.
One thing I would say about burnout is that I think there are two ways to have burnout. So think of a set of tires that you put on a car. So, or think of a car, right?
Done.
So got it. So if you drive mainly on the highway at consistent speeds and there's smooth roads, like that car can go, 250,000 miles before it finally falls apart. But if you're driving off road in the city, constant start stop, running over like debris, running over people, like that car is going to fall apart faster. So
what if you're driving in Florida?
If you're driving in
Target
Florida,
parking lot,
it's going to last like no time at all. It's going to get dings from like parking lots and rebel flags being jabbed into it. So so that happens. But I guess my point is like if the roads as smooth as possible in this metaphor, that you're going to do better. And what that means is knowing, that's all the stuff at the beginning, knowing thyself, creating like as preferential of a work environment as you can and schedule, rather than trying to, for instance, work at times when it isn't good for you to writing more than you know you comfortably can for long periods of time. Like I think that's what leads to burnout faster. Oh, that was the end of the show. All right, well, so we'll see you next week.
Well,
you want to say something so it doesn't so dangly?
Well, I'm thinking about like I'm curious how, like, we know a lot of romance authors that fucking hate writing in the genre, and obviously they're able to disguise it enough that it doesn't come out in their books, otherwise the readers wouldn't enjoy it. So I'm wondering how if you are working on something you just have to get through and you don't love, how do you find something in there that you love enough to make it so the reader isn't hating it?
I was actually having this conversation earlier today. I think that sometimes, I think it depends on who you are. So I don't think you ever could do that, Dave. Like, I think that you have to connect, and you're either too miserable as a human or as a storyteller to like.
No, miserable as a human, not a miserable human.
Right.
Assistant to the regional manager.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a difference.
I don't know what you're saying, but get off my lawn.
I did I spent years as a ghostwriter, and I think that changes it. You can divorce yourself from the copy because it's somebody else's, and there's things that I would never, ever, ever write. Whether they were fiction, whether it was sales copy, whether it was, search engine optimized copy, like whatever it was, it didn't matter. It wasn't my work. I didn't care.
Recruitment info for NAMBLA.
So I'm showing up at the desk to go write something specific, and at that point I'm clocking in, I'm clocking out. It's a job. So then there's the stuff that I'm really passionate about, and that's the stuff I'm going to find flow. Now, I can't say that I've ever found flow with work that...
She's in the Progressive commercials.
I've seen that. There is an ant flow joke.
She visit once a month.
Together, by the way.
So once you found flow.
So once you found flow, it's just different. Like I can't think of any time, even when I wrote 10 SEO articles a day, which there was a stretch of a few months where I was doing that every single day. No, it was 20 of them actually, 2,500 word articles every day. And you would think to get that kind of word count in, you're doing flow, but there was never any flow there. It was just furiously writing. It was hate writing. It's like, oh, how fast can I do this? And there was no joy
So
in
I did my wedding vows.
But there was joy in having it behind me and being done with it, and getting onto the things that I wanted to, because they were important to me. But I find flow in what I'm writing fiction all the time. Like finding flow in telling a story that I want to tell is a pretty achievable thing. So I think the difference is you can't expect one in a different context, right? So if I know that it's just workmanlike writing that I just have to get done, and I'm not expecting flow, my actual feeling of victory will come from just having completed it. Great. But
it's framing in advance, yeah.
It's framing in advance, yeah. Which I think is the best way to hack your mind as a writer.
Right. And what I was going to add to that, and it goes right with what you just said, is that I can gut out just about anything I don't want to do if I know the scope, if it's a defined scope. What kills me is I don't know when the end of it is, right? So if you said, okay, you got to write 10 SEO articles a day indefinitely, that's way harder than you have to do it for a week or a month. Like, it's just because then I don't know when the end is. So I can accomplish anything. I can gut my way through anything as long as I know that this is my reward thing again. Once I know that once I've done it, once I've eaten my vegetables, then I can play. But if it's like, well, we don't know when it's going to end, or when we're done, then you can scrub out 10 toilets a day or so, something equally unpalatable. Like, that's not going to drive me forward. I can't get through it. All right. Well, so that's probably enough about burnout, right? Any final things, Dave? You want to talk about people pooping?
Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's been an hour almost. That's about right.
I like how we open with toilets and we end with toilets.
Well, I'm trying to do a thing. Dave is using a back scratcher. I've never seen anyone actually use a back scratcher before, but there you go.
Dave, say something so the camera goes to you and scratch your back.
I'm using a back scratcher. Wow. I can't imagine people going through life without a back scratcher. I don't know. I can't reach all. I got tiny dinosaur arms.
So you're saying if we did with that game where somebody says you have to pick 10 items to take with you on a desert island for the next 20 years, back scratcher would be there.
What would your 10 items be?
For what would my 10 items?
No, just 3 items. We don't have all day. What are your 3 desert island items that you would take?
Well, before we get that, I would just
plus the fleshlight.
But before we get to the Dave and the fleshlight and the back scratcher, I'd just like to point out some faulty logic here. Stacy says I use one several times a day. It's not weird. Those can both be true, Stacy. Just saying.
I would have to bring some kind of journal to write / draw in. That would be my first thing, a back scratcher, and then Diet Pepsi or Coke.
And fuck your family? They're not
You
on
said
the island with
things.
you?
I don't consider people things. Sorry.
Oh, good
I do. Oh, sorry.
I'm not a sociopath. No, like I had hurt my shoulder a couple of years ago, so I can't reach all the way back and get up. It seems to only itch in a place I can't reach. So this is
interestingly,
amazing.
it's not my ability to. I love that this is where it's going. Interestingly, it's not my ability to reach itches that's stopping me. I guess I don't itch that much. I don't know. All right. Well,
got shitty skin, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe lotion might be your solution.
Ooh,
then I'd have to lotion my
body.
back. How am I going to lotion my back? I can't reach back there.
Well, Sean
Are you not married?
Just
I don't like to ask for anything.
Find some random person. What about that bagger at the Publix? That guy likes
you. Couldn't reach.
By the way, bagger or grocer at Publix is another Dave trope.
Oh, I worked there, so I wasn't aware I wrote about Publix, but okay.
Right, what you know.
Well, considering I've never been to Publix, wouldn't even know what they were without you.
If you apply the right way,
the Publix influence in our books is from you.
I would like to have somebody do a profile of Dave without knowing Dave based on the right way you know edict. Like, what does Dave know?
God.
He knows about wine coolers, pooping, guys named Stan. He knows about dead children and torture. He knows about hopelessness.
Vigilantes, murderers.
I would love a psych profile on Dave, and they just use the No Justice books.
All right. Well, so we'll end on that note.
How many Briannas does he know?
I think I've run across some Briannas, and I haven't read much of Dave's work.
Do I use that name a lot?
Well, it's hilarious. Yes, you do. But it's hilarious in this because there's in back-to-back chapters, there's a Brianna who was murdered, and then a Brianna who's standing in line at Burger King. Totally unrelated.
Is the book called So Many Briannas?
You know what it is? You know why that is? Okay, I'll tell you why. Because when I'm writing, I don't remember the name of the girl that was murdered, so I put murdered girl from book 3 or whatever. So then when I go back in, I find that note for myself, and I go and look and remember, oh, it's Brianna, and I don't connect Brianna into Brianna. I just wrote.
He is writing like Memento. Like, imagine that guy trying to write a novel. Well, what happened? Did this happen yet?
I'd like to write a book called A Bag of Brianna.
What about one of those like Bonnie and Clyde?
A serial killer named Stan.
Bonnie and Clyde or Harold and Maude, something like that. You just do a Brianna and Stan book. What do you think?
I like it a lot.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the after show there.
What's next week? Are we gonna tease next week?
I don't know.
I think we have Rachel Herron next week.
No, that's 2 weeks.
Godfather.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't watched it yet, so.
Oh, are you excited?
Oh, well, it's a short, easy to digest pair of movies.
Well, I gotta find it. We have to watch more than one.
No, you can just watch the first one.
But isn't the first one still like 3 hours long?
Honestly.
It's 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because Dave hates old movies typically, so it is slow.
Yeah,
there is that. But if you're expecting Goodfellas, it's not Goodfellas.
I learned a Marlon Brando tidbit. Do you want to hear this? It's totally random, but I thought
I love Marlon Brando tidbits.
So you know how he does that mumbly
thing? Crazy fucker. Yes.
No, it's and do you know the reason that he has? It's kind of random. He's given a reason why he does that. I don't know how publicly he did it, but what I heard is, do you know what automated dialogue replacement is? Where they record some dialogue for a lot of movies in the studio.
Oh yeah.
And he said that when he's had to do that, he liked doing ADR, but the problem was that the problem that he ran into he was attempting to solve is that when he would get a script and they would shoot it, sometimes they would move the scenes around. So if they had him delivering a line in a scene and he's like, well, shit, if I'd have known where you were going to put that and what you're going to put on the other side, I would have delivered it differently because there's different context. And so ADR which is the replacement dialogue, gave him a chance to re-record the dialogue with new intonation. So he intentionally mumbled so you wouldn't be able to see like what his lips were doing.
Oh, that's awesome.
I do that for this podcast.
Yes. Did you know that in the opening scene of Godfather, which Dave will see, soon,
you'll see the opening scene.
Right.
It's a wedding.
Then he'll be done.
The opening scene is a wedding scene.
It is a wedding scene, Dave. So you can opt out afterwards and then made it to the wedding scene of The Godfather. So you know the cliche, right, where he's petting the cat. So that's in the opening of The Godfather. He's petting a cat. Well, this is hilarious. When Coppola was making that movie, Marlon Brando was like, I want a cat. And he's like, you can't fucking have a cat. Because a cat is like super unpredictable. And it's a really long scene. And you're watching all of these.
Like a dead cat.
Well, it's funny knowing it in context and watching the scene, watching him pet the cat and knowing that it could go off the rails at any second because the cat is actually in control of the scene. but Marlon Brando's like, I'm not doing the scene without a cat. Like, he really seems like he was just such an ass to work with.
An ass, but insistent, and he got great performances for being an ass. I want that cat.
He did great performances. So, yeah. Also, did you know that Paramount wanted Robert Redford for Michael?
Yeah, that would have been. Well, I could maybe see that, but he doesn't look Italian at all.
Yeah, it seems terrible. It's almost like when they wanted to make Godfather 4 with Ben Affleck. True story.
Ooh, wow, that's terrible. All right, well, so do you guys remember when the show ended 15 minutes ago? We should probably rewind the clock a little bit. All right, well, a little bit of after show and then an after show for the after show. It's pretty good. So yeah, so next week we'll talk about the. But don't tempt me. Don't tease me. I'm not going to do it. Next week we'll talk about The Godfather. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Peace out.
Bye.